Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Modern Business Operations. I'm here with Tim Parilla, the Chief Legal Officer at LinkSquares and former General Counsel at DraftKings. Tim, welcome. Thank you for being here. Why don't we start? Why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Seth. Looking forward to the conversation. My current role, Chief Legal Officer at LinkSquares, oversee obviously the legal function, but I also oversee the way I like to describe it, everything that nobody else wanted to do when I joined. So I oversee HR, operations, and IT as well. So when when I first joined LinkSquares, coming from DraftKings, provided me the opportunity to do a little bit more than just do the legal work. And when I was early on at DraftKings, some of the favorite things that I was doing is working with others throughout the organization to help build some of these support functions, and uh, particularly ones that were specific to the fantasy sports, the paid fantasy sports industry, that kind of blended a little bit of this, like, all right, we need this from an operational rigor perspective, but at the same time, we also need to make sure that we're aware of some of the regulatory constraints around our business. And so I really enjoyed that. And so when I had the opportunity to come over to LinkSquares, the CEO, Vishal, he said, listen, you absolutely can have a broader purview than just the legal function. And, we've got a lot of stuff that needs to be built. I joined, there were about 70 people, and the overwhelming majority of those people were split between, product and engineering and the revenue org. And there were basically everybody else was kind of, the finance team was doing HR and all of that sort of stuff. Our CEO and CTO were effectively the IT team. So, there's a lot that was going on there, but that was really what was exciting for me, was coming over and being able to do a little bit more than just the real stuff.
That sounds like a very full plate.
It's good. It's good. I've got good leaders there that know a lot more than I do of their discipline. So see.
So legal is a field that is notoriously slow to change, right? So how do you begin to advocate for innovation within your organization from that perspective, or even within your own legal team?
That's a good question. I think, as you say, there's two different audiences there. I think typically when you think about legal embracing innovative approaches to performing work for the organization, you have to assume that there's going to be some level of investment associated with that. And so when you look at any organization that maybe is a little strapped for resources, there's the need to be able to justify what the spend is going to be to help, like usually an investment in technology of some sort, in order to help spur or be a catalyst for that innovation. And a big part of that is being able to operate in a similar way that other business units across the organization operate. And a very big part of that is being able to bring data to the table to be able to show the contribution that you as an organization or your legal org is making to the business. And so if you're able to, paint the picture of this investment in the software, where it will allow us to be, to be more data driven and really quantify the work that the legal team is putting into the business to help to move the business forward. And when you do that effectively and actually embrace being data driven as a legal team, things like identifying or justifying your new hires, for example. Hey, we need another head, right? We need another lawyer. Well, why? What can you show me? Well, we're really busy, right? That just doesn't really cut it for most other business units unless and until that business unit starts to fail. And at that point, once the business unit starts to fail, it really is on the leadership of the legal team. Like, that's your failure. Like, you didn't do your job. If you can't justify a hire and you need a hire, you're not doing your job. Right. And so I'll take it even a step further. I think for lawyers, and maybe this gets into the second challenge, would be getting your legal team to adopt new technology and change process and be willing to do things a little bit differently. Today's general counsel, chief legal leaders generally, like, if you are not using data to drive decisions, if you are not having quantifiable data to show the impact that your team is making on the organization, you are just full stop not doing your job. You're just not, or if you are, you're not doing your job well. Like, you should consider yourself a failure if you're not doing these things, right? I mean, and I know that sounds a little extreme and a little bit harsh, and maybe it is, but imagine walking into an exec meeting and you're the head of sales and you don't come in with data. Or imagine you are the chief marketing officer and you don't come in and have quantitative data showing the performance of your marketing campaigns and your marketing investment. Like, it's just full stop unacceptable. But somehow a very high cost center like legal, I mean, even finance, right? Finance comes in, they absolutely will justify their existence. IT does it 100%, right? Everybody else in the organization does it. Why should legal be any different, right? Especially at such a large investment. Usually lawyers are pretty expensive on a per head count basis relative to others throughout the organization. And like, why should you be able to get away with not bringing data to the conversation? You shouldn't. I think executives today are expecting more from their legal team, and they absolutely should. And that more comes in the form of data. And, I think it also comes in the form of organization, right? The idea your legal team being allowed to conduct itself in a way that appears to the rest of the business as being chaotic. You should be busy, but you should be controlled, right? And measured in the way that, like, if your organization appears chaotic, it probably is because it is. And that probably means that you're missing things, right? And so when you talk about innovation, generally, I think you sell that calm, cool, collected, efficient, legal, or you sell that data-driven decision making and quantifying the impact that the team is making. And then for the lawyers that are part of the team, these lawyers just have to accept that it's part of the job, right? It's the functional equivalent of, let's say you're a Salesforce shop, right? And you have a couple of new salespeople who come in and they look at the manager on the first day and they're like, listen, I'm not a big Salesforce person. And so I'll just update it like once a month and we'll just go that way. And like, that doesn't work there. And why should that work in legal? Like, most people who are practicing today, are of the generation that grew up with technology. I mean, yeah, some of your 30, 40, 50-year practicing lawyers, but they're starting, those folks are starting to retire on giant piles of money for them, right? But I think as we get farther and farther along, we are a technology generation. And as I say, today and tomorrow's legal leaders are absolutely literate in technology. They should be able to learn and use software and accept that while maybe that introduces a little bit of a pain point into their, their process, the results that you get are necessary to have. And so you endure a little bit of that discomfort so that you get those results.
Well, let me ask a clarifying question about data when we're talking about data. So I'm inferring, I think, that one of the things you're saying when you say you have the data, it's not just, a printed out spreadsheet with some numbers on it and some names, right? This is a different type of data. These are measurable KPIs, right? That everyone's bringing to the board essentially, right? Or to the C-suite. Can you talk a little bit about what you really mean by data, and especially compared to maybe what that may have meant to legal teams, 30 years ago versus today?
Absolutely. So I think that, maybe 30 years ago, and even a lot of teams that are, and a lot of companies that are putting technology out right now, they talk about, matter management, But you think in a law firm, like the data that you're using is how much time did you spend on that particular matter for that particular client? And law firms get really good at tracking, and law firm lawyers have to learn how to use that software, so on and so forth, because that's how the law firm, right? Now you look at that matter management system for an in-house environment, and it looks relatively similar in many ways. And sure, that can produce data. How long did this lawyer take on this task or that task? Um, but what I think you're really looking at is data that you can put in context. And let me give you an example. So let's say the CEO comes to the legal leadership and says, "Legal leadership, uh, I want to start selling our product, right? Some durable good into this particular jurisdiction that we're okay." So a lot of things go into that. Obviously, there's some stuff on the marketing side, operations, et cetera, et cetera. But from a legal perspective, you've got to go actually see if there are any regulatory issues with you entering the market, see if you need to have a physical footprint in the market, for example, any manufacturing capabilities, durable goods. You have, you're going to want to understand products liability. You're going to want to understand like a whole host of different things. You're probably going to be talking to, let's say you actually need to hire employees there. You have to go and set that up, look at all of this stuff. Okay. And if I came to the CEO and said, "Hey, it took the legal team 98 hours to do that," the CEO is like, "Hey, it's not really helpful, right?"
Right.
But
A contextless number of hours, right?
exactly. But what's really important is not how long, we're not looking for data to measure the efficiency of the lawyer. Now I can look at my CEO and I can be like, "This is actionable for you. It takes approximately 6 weeks from the time you say go to the time we sell our first product." That's meaningful data, right? And it's just a very, very simple way to think about it, but you can get these insights, by tracking the work that's being done in a meaningful way. Now you think about it in the context of your contracts, and, it is also a very compelling thing to literally just with, um, with data that says, the legal team reviewed 200 contracts in the last month, uh, and that turnaround time for those contracts was, zero point 0.6 days or zero point 0.8 days. And the out of the ones that closed, which was only about 50, that accounted for, $6 million in revenue. That tells you a couple of things. Number one, that tells you what legal is doing for your sales cycle, right? How much of your sales cycle is chewed up by contracts going back and forth, right, versus actually selling and delivering. And then it also tells you what your capital investment is holistically in deals that don't close, which is really important, right? And that allows you and revenue leaders to go and make decisions around, okay, when do you actually get to the contract stage? It's not like someone's like, "Oh, cool, I want a demo." Boom, you send them a contract, right? Like just like you don't immediately send someone to a demo stage, you qualify the lead and so on and so forth. And so that can provide actionable data revenue can then use to help with their. So there are a lot of there's a lot of context that you really need to be familiar with within your organization to make the data that you're able to track useful.
So in terms of, thinking about efficiency, and not just efficiency, but let's say performance, there's certain data that you want to collect and present. But internally within that legal team, right, it's sort of a different conversation. And maybe you're looking more specifically at like, hey, I have, a junior level attorney and like they're spending all their time on certain tasks. How can we unlock, their potential, both their time and their expertise? And this is where a lot of the software tools come in, right? There's a lot of legal tech shows up here. What are some of the big pain points that you find that you want to solve with technology, and by all means speak to any of the types of technologies or any of the tech stack that you have employed successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. I think uh, the biggest thing, and this is something for LinkSquares that's core to the way that we approach building and providing products to our customers, like automating legal work. Lawyers are generally pretty good at doing stuff that lawyers should be doing. Um, Believe it or not, lawyers are generally not the best at other things, managing projects, right? Maintaining organization, right? So what we try to do is automate those things that anybody can do, so that lawyers can spend time doing what lawyers do. Um, and there's kind of a curve in scale that, like, whether it's scale of work that the team needs to perform or scale of the team itself in terms of number of people, where, like, maybe if you have only one attorney introducing some technology, not going to be largely helpful. But at three attorneys, it starts to become more helpful. Five attorneys becomes more helpful for sure. And you 5x your contract volume, or the volume of whatever, your legal issues may be. Maybe you're a really IP heavy shop. You've got a lot of IP inquiries coming in. Um, Something like that can like really see some major advantages when you have a combination of a lot of people and a lot of work to do. It's worth a little bit of pain and process transformation within your team and the way that your team works, because that is actually how you will gain those efficiencies.
Yeah, can you
That's
talk?
when software becomes most of it.
Can you talk about the process part of it as well? Both the necessity of it within the context of the technology, but then also how that scales with the size of a team. A one person team, processes whatever it is. A 5-person team is perhaps completely different, and on from there.
Yeah. So, obviously there are a ton of different ways to set up your process, from, you know, depending on your business, depending on your legal team and the work that you're doing. But I think, what's essential, particularly if you are using technology, is that you have to move your process to make that technology effective, right? Similar to, how we were discussing the Salesforce. Salesforce is only as helpful to orgs as the quality of the data is. But as soon as you have high quality data, that actually becomes incredibly impactful. And it's the same thing with legal. And so, the process is, for contracts, for example, every single contract needs to go through your contract lifecycle system. And it's not enough for you to just get to signature. After you get to signature, I need you to verify these 5 things, these 6 things. And this was something that I did with the team at DraftKings. We actually did a pre-signature tool for a while. And we only used post-signature, but there were things that we had to do. Like, for example, could we use this particular sports team's logo in connection with a paid call to action on a fantasy sports contest on social media? And what were the geographic limitations, right? Like, I can't put out a tweet that's geo-targeted Boston that has the Detroit Tigers logo all over it, right? It's a problem. And so, like, there are just different things that we would have to take out and track from our contracts, in addition to your standard things that were automatically extracted, like just sort of typical terms, termination provisions, breach, all that sort of stuff. And so, I told my team this, that contract, yeah, it's signed, congratulations, but it's not done for you until it's in our system. And these things are tracked, because it's going to be somebody else who's out there on a Saturday afternoon getting hammered from somebody in marketing. It's like, we got to run this campaign. We got a market that just opened up, just got approved for a UFC. I need to be able to use these logos. Do I have the green light? Yes or no? And you got to be able to do it right there. You don't have time to go and VPN it to a shared drive to like you miss it is millions of dollars in a market lost, right? And so you got to actually embrace the system. You have you have to, as a legal leader, mandate its use the same way a revenue leader would mandate the Salesforce use. And so I think two aspects of process though is you have to be, and this applies not just to legal. I think this applies particularly to operations as well. It's like you have to have a very firm understanding of your level of influence throughout to change process throughout your organization, right? If you're a leader in operations and you're able to get your marketing team to change its process, you're able to use influence to get your sales team or your product team or whomever to change their process. Good. That's awesome. You're a really powerful person and congratulations. But a lot of times leaders are in particular, legal leaders don't have that level of influence, more or less inconvenience everybody around them so that life is more convenient for the legal team. So you then think about, all right, if I can't influence process throughout the organization, what is my process right? And how do I accept one level of chaos in terms of intake? And how do I start to take steps to show the rest of the organization, hey, if you do this just a little bit differently, or check out this cool thing that we do, learn a little bit more about our process, the organization will say, oh, that's neat. I now have increased visibility into what you all are doing for my projects. That's great. I will do this. So you can kind of like start to spider web out a little bit by showing the this to the actual like boots on the ground stakeholders. That's how you can start to influence process.
Great. We'll wind it down with our two boilerplate questions. The first one is what is the best advice that you've received in your career?
Oh gosh, probably to stop being such a lawyer.
That seems difficult given the job.
Yeah, yeah. The principle behind it was, uh, to be success to really, if you really want to be successful as an in-house attorney, like focus on being a literate business person first. Your legal skills will be there. If you're in the door, you have a level of competency, like you'll be okay. Where a lot of legal leaders fall is that they're not able to adapt to the business. They're not able to understand how to operate within the business, not able to understand the product as well as they should. And, ultimately they're not able to make any recommendations outside their legal expertise. So when you become more of a business person, it provides you license to actually take a position, which is really what the executives expect lawyers to be able to do. It's like, don't just tell me the law and let me be more confused. Tell me what you think. Where do you want to go? Like what would you do if the call were yours right now, knowing all of these things? You can't actually answer that question with any level of credibility unless you've already established a certain level of business literacy parity with the initiatives. So
Sure.
being able to be a business person first is really, really important.
That makes a ton of sense, especially in that context. And so finally, is there anything you want to promote or share about yourself or LinkSquares? And if people want to contact you, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, contact you can hit me on LinkedIn, which is pretty easy. And if you want to email me, you can. Although sometimes email gets a little bit challenging. It's just tim@linksquares.com. Um, and also I do a pilot themed podcast where I have different legal and business professionals come in, have conversations, talk a lot of the same things that you and I talked about today. It's called Cockpit Counsel. You can check that out. But as far as promotion of LinkSquares, LinkSquares, what we're providing is a full suite technology to help you manage your legal department. We obviously have a really strong ground in CLM, but what we really are, and the main focus of our organization going forward is really being a one-stop software solution for the modern general counsel. The general counsel understands that is the general counsel who wants to make sure and is willing to change process within their organization to get to this end state. The general counsel who wants the end state because the general counsel understands that that end state is going to be the best thing for the career and the best thing for the business. So, um, yeah, check us.
Sounds great. Tim Parilla, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your insights and expertise.
Thanks, Seth. Really appreciate the time.